What's good, Atlanta? This is the Blog and Dirty Podcast, where Dirty Bird is the word if you haven't heard. I'm your host, John Buhler, lead writer, fansided.com. Got an exciting show for you guys today. We're a little more than a week out from the 2025 NFL Draft. It's all really anybody can talk about. But before I dive into today's show, I'm going to give a little bit of upkeep of what's going on here with the program, when you can expect to see it, and what comes next. So, going on today with normal regular time, now 11 a.m. On Wednesday. Going to be doing a show again, this time again next week. On Thursday, the day of the draft, look for me to be on Stacking the Box when the Atlanta Falcons are picking at 15, probably be on for a few picks, react to that in real time. It won't be as chaotic as it was when the Falcons took Michael Penix Jr. number 8 overall last year, but we'll see what happens. After that, I will be doing an episode talking about the draft from more of a college football-centric thing on Fall Start with my colleague, Cody Williams. And then after that, I'm going to be going on a little bit of PTO the following week. So I will be back on here to kind of react to what happened in the draft, I think on Friday, May 1st, I believe, or May 2nd, one of those 2 days. So that Friday, yeah, I had that perfectly down. So yeah, looking at the calendar, yeah, Friday, May 2nd is looking like going to be when I will kind of react to what all the Falcons did in the draft. I wish I could be a little bit sooner, but life happens, and sometimes you're hella burnt out. Just got to keep powering through the post Super Bowl window with that. But yeah, so we got an exciting show for you today, another one next week, reaction, and then we'll have one later on in the week in a couple weeks. So that's kind of what we got here in and around the draft. So we're going to start here. We're going to put a dude on our team, bro. Yes, there is a potential that Jalen Ramsey could reunite with Raheem Morris in Atlanta, but will the Falcons trade for the star defensive back? This kind of came out of nowhere. I think that what's going on in Miami, it seems as though that both parties want to move their separate ways. Ramsey doesn't want to be in a situation where he doesn't feel that they're going to win. Obviously, the Tyreek Hill thing is kind of a catastrophe. We don't know if Tua is going to be healthy enough to have a long-term career there. But also, Ramsey kind of bounces around. I mean, he hasn't been anywhere more than 3 years since high school. Whether that be Florida State, Jacksonville, the LA Rams, now the Dolphins. We do know that he is very close with Raheem Morris. That was his defensive coordinator with the Rams. We also know that Ramsey's the finances are not going to be working in the Dolphins' favor right now. So he signed a 3-year, $72 million extension. 24 and change of that is fully guaranteed. Again, like this is something where like he's under contract with the Dolphins through 2028 up until his age 35 season in 2029. So if anybody trades for him, they're looking to get probably, 4 years worth of Jalen Ramsey, essentially the last little bit of his prime. As far as if the Falcons are going to trade for him, I think that, if you put emotions into it, with this being our team and with this being the coach that I think Ramsey has the most amount of respect for, then yeah. But I'm looking at the latest odds, I think from a Bet Online. Actually, I think it's a Sports Betting AJ. Your Falcons have 33-1 odds of getting in. I would say that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Like top half, like 15th best odds in the league. I wrote about this for fansided.com yesterday, like some of the more under the radar teams who could be a contender for him. I mentioned the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals, who are at 50-1 and 66-1 to get him as contenders in the AFC. I feel that the Bengals are kind of in the same sort of spot as the Falcons in terms of like they're looking for the same players to make their defense. Offense looks pretty good. Borderline playoff team last year, didn't get in. We're going to see what happens this year. Obviously, they have a little bit more firepower with Joe Burrow being further along than Michael Penix Jr., but they're kind of one of the same. And then Baltimore, it's kind of like, okay, can you get over the top? Can you get Lamar Jackson to a Super Bowl for once? Pairing Jalen Ramsey opposite of Marlon Humphrey would be incredible in their secondary, but is this really a Baltimore move? The team that I think has the best chance of getting him, that would be the Washington Commanders. They're at 8-1. That gives them the 5th best chance of getting him. Sports Betting AG has the Raiders at 4-1, Cardinals at 5-1, Cowboys at 6-1, 49ers at 7-1, Commanders 8-1, and Lions 10-1. Look, I think the Cardinals could be a pretty interesting fit for them as well. I don't really see the Raiders or Cowboys being much of a contender. And then obviously the 49ers are always really screwy with their finances. Maybe they could be a Super Bowl team this year, or maybe they fire Kyle Shanahan after this year. I'd prefer the latter, to be honest with you. But I think that if the Falcons were to trade for Jalen Ramsey, I don't think they're going to have to give up the farm for that. I may have been corrected on that, thinking that, okay, maybe we don't have to give up number 15 to get him. Maybe you're looking at like a 4th-round pick in a year or two. But again, the Falcons don't really have the draft capital to trade for Jalen Ramsey in 2025. Maybe there's something in 2026 that could entice the Dolphins. But even though that they play in opposite conferences, they play each other semi-regularly in the preseason, there may be that connection with Raheem Morris. There's a lot of moving pieces to be had there. So I will say, though, if Jalen Ramsey were to somehow be released, I would expect the Falcons to jump right on that very quickly to bring him in. And I think he'd really make the secondary even better. Look at him potentially replacing Justin Simmons at safety in some capacity. That kind of firepower. You've got Jesse Bates. You've got A.J. Terrell. If you had Ramsey in there, that's looking pretty good. Again, defensive backfield is the position group of note that Raheem Morris specializes in. I think that would be incredible to get him here. I'd be very excited about it. But I would say this, earlier this offseason, we talked about the potential fit of getting Trey Hendrickson from the Bengals. I also talked last show about TJ Watt coming over from the Steelers. I think Watt had the best odds of them, but I think Hendrickson would have been an interesting fit. Although I think the Bengals make that complicated with the fact that they don't trade, they do things their own way. They're very much mom and pop sort of shop there. I do think that Ramsey's connection with Morris matters. And if that is the case, then I think this gives the Falcons a better chance that people would largely expect. Again, I'm not counting on it because the Falcons are in a bit of a financial – they got their hands tied behind their back with Cousins. They don't have a lot of picks because of the Cousins tampering and the Matthew Judon trade. So if they're going to trade for him, it's probably going to require something to come from the 2026 draft. Again, we'll see. But it could happen this upcoming week in Green Bay. It may happen a little bit further along the line. Maybe the Dolphins and Ramsey will mend fences, but you have to remember this guy's immensely talented, a tad mercurial, and there's a reason why he doesn't last anywhere for very long. Maybe he's exactly what we need for about 2 or 3 years to really get the most out of Michael Penix Jr.'s contract. And the only way I can see this is if the Dolphins look, we're done with Tua. Let's bring on Kirk Cousins and let's just tank it, baby. That's not happening. But Miami is in a bit of disarray. And I will say that even though that the Falcons have had a really struggle-filled last several years, I like where we're at a lot more than where Miami is. It also seems as though Miami, who is picking in and around where Atlanta is, they're looking at a defensive back in the first round. That may be where Georgia's Malachi Starks goes. That may be where Jahdae Barron out of Texas ends up going. Will Johnson, if he falls out of Michigan, I don't think Travis Hunter is going to be on the board, although he feels very exceptionally Miami. I think that they're looking to move on from Jalen Ramsey, but they put there's a very high price tag for that. A lot of moving pieces need to happen. I'd love to see it happen for the Falcons, but right now I'm a little reticent. It's just wishful thinking. Again, Raheem Morris is the big key here. We'll see what Jeff Ulbrich has to bring to the table as well. Of course, because we're moving on to our next topic, we got to talk about some more. You like that with Kirk Cousins. What comes next for Cousins with the Browns out of the equation? Sports Illustrated's my Minute Media colleague, Albert Breer, talked about this. With Cleveland being out of the equation by them signing Joe Flacco, the team to watch right now is Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh has Mason Rudolph into the building. And they know what they have in him. He's decent enough to be a stopgap starter, but your ceiling with Rudolph starting games for the Steelers is about 9 wins, which is, Mike Tomlin's going to do cartwheels in the streets over that. So, yeah, that. But you're going to be in the awful middle again forever there. I also sense that the Steelers are very much looking at a quarterback in this draft. They're picking out 21. Maybe Shore Sanders falls to them. Maybe Jackson Dart falls to them. Maybe they trade up. I think the Saints are a team to watch as well. Again, we'll talk about the Saints to finish the show with the Derek Carr situation. But Pittsburgh right now feels like it's got to be the it or them. Like there's nobody else. Like I'm trying my best on the fly to think of any other place where Cousins could get traded to with Cleveland out of the equation. I mean, your next best bet is like, okay, you want to run it back with the Vikings. I don't think he wants to go there. It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing there. They got to see what they have in JJ McCarthy. He knows what kind of offense they're going to try to run there with Kevin O'Connell and everything like that. But again, he left the Vikings because he didn't want his replacement to be drafted for him. At this point, like he just has to accept the fact that Atlanta is probably the best option for him at this point. Again, the Falcons got to do what's in their best interest. They've got Penix. They've got two really high-end quarterbacks. A lot of teams don't have one. But, like, they don't need to trade him away. Well, he's going to have to agree to it, too, because he has to waive his no-trade clause. Again, I don't think he would waive it to go to a place like Minnesota or the Tennessee Titans because they're going to draft a Cam Ward. Maybe the Saints are a possibility, too. But, man, it would be so incredibly Falcons to trade him to the Saints, and then he cooks us, and we look even more stupid. Like, I feel optically like that's just a PR disaster waiting to happen. Going to make my life miserable writing content on fanside.com. That would be the case. But like, the anti-Bobby Hebert, if you will. But or Morton Anderson, whatever, it doesn't matter. The thing that I'd say is at Pittsburgh is the best and most likely place for him to go because they don't have a true succession plan at quarterback. Kenny Pickett failed, and now he thinks that he can compete for Joe Flacco for the starting job there in Cleveland. Good luck with that, bud. There are other options that'll happen. There are other places where he could conceivably go. What you have to remember is somebody always gets hurt in the preseason. Teams panic, and the Falcons could potentially capitalize on that. But I think the other thing is like the Falcons by like not being able to trade him to the Browns and with Joe Flacco going in there on a 1-year deal worth $4 million, but up to $13 million in incentives. It didn't seem as though the Falcons were like willing to eat more than $13 million of Cousins' contract. Like they want whoever takes him to eat it. And they're not going to do it. And I feel stupid. We're trying to sell something. We're intentionally or unintentionally destroying our own asset here. But again, like Penix does have an injury past, and if we have to put Cousins back in there, he knows what to do with Zac Robinson. It'll be awkward as hell, but like we know what this comes. So it kind of feels like it's the Steelers. If not, it's probably us for a while, and we'll see what happens. And on the topic of Zac Robinson, and here's to you, Mr. Robinson. Came across a very interesting article on ESPN.com. Falcons beat writer Mark Raimondi wrote about this. Kind of a little bit of a deep dive into like what makes Zac Robinson special. But the big takeaway is the Falcons can focus on defense in the draft because of the trust and faith they have placed in Zac Robinson. It talks about him just drawing plays in class at Oklahoma State University. Again, Zac Robinson, I remember him playing for the Pokes. I distinctly remember watching the road game where my dogs were playing in Stillwater and Zac Robinson cooked us. He was the quarterback. I think Des Bryant was his wide receiver. And then after that came Brandon Whedon and Justin Blackman. And then a little bit later, we saw, Mason Rudolph have his turn, at there playing for Mike Gundy. But it's interesting to look at this. Like Zac Robinson, I believe, was one of only 6 guys invited to the Senior Bowl when he came out. He was like a late round pick or undrafted, went to the Patriots, didn't play very much, if at all. Ended up kind of going the analyst route, did some work there with Pro Football Focus before he caught on with Sean McVay's staff there with the LA Rams. And that's where he got connected with, Raheem Morris. He also crossed paths with guys, very savvy offensive minds in that building, besides McVay, whether that be Kevin O'Connell, Liam Cohen, and Mike LaFleur. Obviously, you've got 2 head coaches now and the brother of a head coach. It seems, and also I didn't realize that he grew up like, a diehard John Elway Denver Broncos fan. grew up. I think he grew up in Colorado. I think I knew that, but like being like the son of like a season ticket holder for that. So like football's in his blood, and it also just seems like reading this article about him, like we have something really special as an offensive coordinator here. It's not necessarily like he's the next guy off the McVay Shanahan tree. In time, that branch will sprout, and we'll see where he goes. Maybe he stays. I doubt it because we don't know what we're doing with head coach because that's what we do as Falcons fans. But the big thing is like he seems to be a guy that everybody in the offensive room champions. I was reading all these quotes that Raimondi got. I think Darnell Mooney said it best. He's like, he just communicates really effectively. A wide receiver saying like he gets everybody on the same page. Cousins had glowing things to say about him. Penix did. Drake London's like, oh, I love playing for this guy. And I think that like by having a player or a coordinator of that note, it feels like we almost kind of sort of have that locked down on that side of the that's of the equation here. We're basically putting so much of our focus and effort and energy into trying to think what the word is. Like we're focusing so much more on like defense in the draft and everything like that. So by basically saying like Zac Robinson's got this is empowering his side of the ball. We've drafted well. We've seen, you've got Pitts there. You've got London. You've got Robinson, the other Robinson. You've got Penix. You've still got McGarry and Lindstrom from like a previous staff and everything like that with the guys that Dimitrov drafted and everything like that. But now it's like, okay, we got to put all of our attention on defense. And it's a very bold move. It's been very unorthodox. I can't ever really recall the Falcons doing this. Maybe every so often there's a team that goes like one direction, but that's something that like other teams that have never won a Super Bowl, like the Panthers or Titans do. But that's who we are. That's our lot in life. That's where we belong, so to speak. Anyway, like I found this feature to be really interesting. Again, it kind of shows more along the lines of like, what Robinson's capable of. It shows that he's a future head coach. And I think the big thing is like he's got everybody in the offensive room in agreement with him. Like this guy's a stud. He's got, obviously he's only been an offensive coordinator for 1 year. He got better as the season progressed. We'll see what happens in year 2 in this system. But man, Raheem Morris really has to buckle down on defense. And I think that like by Morris putting his trust and faith in Robinson on offense, then Morris can focus on his side of the ball to make that better. And again, I think that was part of the problem with Jimmy Lake. Jimmy Lake became a problem at the end of the year. Morris kind of came in there. The pass rush did get a little better. The secondary got a little worse. Bringing in Ulbrich, again, it's all about having better senses of communication across the board. And here's to you, Mr. Robinson. I can't wait to see what you can do with this offense next year. Moving on to the second half of our show, let's have a slice of pumpkin pie, if you will. Where could the Falcons be leaning at number 15 or overall with only 1 week out? Been reading some mock drafts and stuff, but for the most part, I've seen a few trades. I've seen them trade back a little bit. I've seen them move back in a deal with like the Bengals and the Chargers. I think that's what Torrey McElhenney and Will McFadden did for AtlantaFalcons.com. Again, like my brain doesn't necessarily process trades. I just kind of focus on the pick you can make in that moment. Again, I'm not an NFL talent evaluator. I'm not a GM. I'm not the best drafter. I make observations from a fan standpoint and try to explain that the best I can without ever playing the game. Who cares? We all know what we're talking about. You can be a fan, doesn't matter. The big thing I've seen with the Falcons is it's really looking like about 1 of 4 or 5 guys they're going to take here. Again, they're all edge rushers. I would say right now the leader in the clubhouse would be Mike Green out of Marshall. Again, I don't know how I feel about that because this is like we're going with the one group of 5 guy. Yes, a guy who starred at the Senior Bowl, who starred at a very good group of 5 program in Marshall, but like there may be more higher end talents to be had at the same position group. And what if we whiff and the next guy goes to like, I don't know, ends up going to the Buccaneers and we got to deal with him twice a year for a decade now. That's one that I've seen. Again, I'm not super excited about that. I've started to see James Pierce Jr.'s name come alive. Please don't take him at 15. Take him in the second round. Talk about him here more. I've also seen a little bit more with like Shamar Stewart. Again, this is a guy that people are going to be drafting off of traits. They're like, oh my God, he's the next Myles Garrett. Again, is he really? Like that's a huge pressure to be the next Myles Garrett, who was the next Von Miller. Why was he not productive at A&M, despite playing for Mike Elko? I don't really know. It would be very Falcons of us to take him, but again, this may be the guy that we end up doing. At 15, if that's where the dominoes fall, I'd understand it. It's the same thing, I guess, with Mike Green, if you will. Again, I don't see James Pierce coming off the board at 15. The other ones are the two Georgia players in it, Jalen Walker and Mykel Williams. I feel that, like, in most estimations that I've done, it looks as though, like, Walker's going to be off the board before Atlanta's picking at 15. I figure the Salisbury, North Carolina native may end up going to the Panthers, which would be awful for us because he's going to be really good, and we play them twice a year for a decade. Then Mykel Williams, again, he got hurt in the Georgia opener versus Clemson in the Bends, and that depreciated stock a little bit. That may be a guy that, like, maybe 15 is a bit of a reach, but if you trade back to like the 20s in like a deal with like the Chargers or something like that, that may be a pick as well. So those are really the five names of note that I've seen the most here. I'll do this now, and I'll do this again a week from now on next week's show. And I love to be wrong here. Here's what I would say. So right now, the leader in the clubhouse that I think the Falcons are going to take at 15 is Mike Green out of Marshall. Who do I think they're going to take? I think they're going to take Shamar Stewart out of A&M. Who do I want them to take? I want them to take Mykel Williams. And again, like, maybe those three will align, and maybe I'll get more on board with it. But right now, we're all over the place. My big thing is with those five prospects I've mentioned, I think Jalen Walker is going to be off the board before we pick. If he's there, we pass on him. We're stupid. Don't do that. And if we take James Pierce at 15 and the other guys on the board, then we're stupid too. So that's kind of the higher end of the spectrum. I would say if I had to rank them, I would say Walker's my favorite of these ones. I would say number two, I would probably go, 2A, 2B between Mykel Williams and Mike Green. I'd probably go Green over Williams just because I think that, like, the value is a little bit, it would make more sense for us to take Mike Green at 15 than Mykel Williams at 15. 4, probably Shamar Stewart, because again, 2A, 2B, and then 5, James Pierce Jr., because that's a second round pick. I don't see it in the first round, and I could be so wrong here, but again, I don't see it. So moving on to our penultimate topic here, let's do some great. You could be on our team. Let's look at who the Falcons have brought in for a top 30 visit. I'm looking this up. Shannon McCarriston of CBS Sports has done a great job of updating this, and this is accurate as of I think Friday or Saturday. And I've done this before. I think the Falcons, last time I did this, they had about 7 names on here who they brought in for a top 30 visit. I think that list is probably doubled or so. So let me have a sip of coffee real quick, and I'll rattle off who they have and who are the new additions and how do I feel about it. Yeah, going solo is hard. Yeah, talking just by yourself for minutes on end is not easy. So right now, the Falcons have brought in South Carolina safety Nick Emenwari, Oregon offensive tackle Josh Connerly Jr., Michigan cornerback Will Johnson, Alabama linebacker Q Robinson, Kentucky cornerback Maxwell Hairston, Texas A&M edge rusher Shamar Stewart, Memphis linebacker Chandler Martin. Those are all names that I recognized before. And these are all the new ones. Texas wide receiver Isaiah Bond, William and Mary Tribe offensive tackle Charles Grant, South Carolina defensive tackle TJ Sanders, Tennessee defensive tackle Omar Norman Lott, Virginia safety Jonas Sanker, Tennessee defensive end James Pierce Jr., and Georgia linebacker Chaz Chambliss. Again, these names will probably move up here. Again, the Falcons have looked pretty hard at Georgia players as well. So like maybe they'll throw like Mykel Williams, Jalen Walker, whomever else on here. It is nice to see Chaz Chambliss on here. So maybe I'll start there with like the newer additions here. I think that's a guy that they might take like in like the early part of day 3. Chambliss, certainly one of my favorite players on the Georgia defense the last couple of years. He just makes plays. I mean, I know there's people like Jalen Walker is like the big name in the linebacking core, but he's kind of more of like a movable chess piece. And then I would also say that Smile Mondon Jr. Has gotten a little bit more love in the draft process than Chambliss, but Chambliss I always kind of felt like could make plays. Again, I don't know what his NFL ceiling is, but I know he can play at this level. Again, I think safety Dan Jackson's a guy who's a sleeper that I think anybody could get, maybe undrafted free agent. I think that guy can really play. Chambliss has just really good instincts. I wonder about the speed, but like this is an NFL player. We'll see what he does. So I think it's interesting that they brought him in. I think they wanted to see more about him because I figured out like Georgia's pro day, it's more about the bigger names. And, a guy like Chambliss falls through the cracks. You look at him a little more closely. I understand bringing him in. I think that's a good move. Looking at Isaiah Bond is the first one that really jumps off to the page for me. Again, I think he's the only skill position guy that the Falcons have brought in. Again, he played for Steve Sarkisian, the former Falcons offensive coordinator, now the head coach at Texas. We know that Texas has like a trio of receivers with Bond, Golden, and Bolden. Yeah, Silas Bolden, Matthew Golden, Isaiah Bond. That was the big three guys who were catching passes from Quinn Ewers last year. Bond, a little bit more of a vertical threat, could stretch the field. I think that could be like, maybe that's the guy that we're looking to kind of fill that Rondale Moore, Ray McLeod spot. I know we still have Ray McLeod, I think, but like Moore is obviously signed with another team after not playing for the Falcons. Almost knocked Dermot off the table. That would have been loud because this picks up everything. That's Restream for you. Anyway, like Bond intrigues me because I think that could open up space for Penix and the offense to operate. Having a guy to take over the top. Again, you got to remember Zac Robinson comes from the Rams, and they had Tutu Atwell doing that, out of Louisville for them for a while. So this could be a piece that we've been missing, to allow more opportunities for Drake London, Darnell Mooney, and Ray McLeod to be kind of more possession receivers. If they just tell Isaiah Bond to run, I get it. That's fine. Again, James Pierce Jr. is on here as well. Again, I'd be okay with him as a second-round pick, as a first-round pick. I can't really buy it. Maybe if you trade back, like if he's 20 and you really like him and you get some further compensation, but you can't take him at 15. Don't really have much to say about the other guys on here who are new additions. I will say, though, like Will Johnson and Shamar Stewart are two names that I keep seeing on here that I feel like could potentially be first-round picks for the Falcons. I don't know if Will Johnson gets the Falcons at 15. Shamar Stewart might be there at 15. Those are two guys that I would not be stunned if they took them. Josh Connolly Jr., I think up there, that's kind of more of like, okay, maybe potential replacement for Jake Matthews, who's getting up there. Nick Emanwari, I like that. I don't know much about TJ Sanders, but I think anybody who plays defense for South Carolina, they can play at the next level. Maxwell Hairston, that's a guy that I think the Falcons could potentially trade back and maybe take late in the first round. Would much rather him be a second round pick. For whatever reason, I'm just going to say this. That's the one guy on that list that I feel is most likely to play for the Falcons. I don't know why, but I feel like of everybody else, like that's the guy that I feel Atlanta is most likely to take of anybody they brought in. I could be totally wrong here. We'll go back and see who else they brought in for a top 30 visit this time next week. If it's still the same, then I'll just do a different segment there. But that's kind of where we're looking at with who the Falcons have brought in up to this point. And let's move on to our last topic of the day. Let's go around the perimeter a little bit with how Derek Carr's status for the 2025 season could impact the Falcons. This is a little bit of a stunner here. Apparently, he's dealing with a shoulder injury that might, keep him out for the bulk, if not all, of the 2025 season. It's been mismanaged. I think it's been leaked by his camp. I think they want to try to avoid him. There's a lot of pieces going on here, so I'm gonna try to keep it straight because Lord knows if I can. I think Diana Rossini of The Athletic said on Scoop City that this may have been put out there so that he can avoid being panicked. So, like, by guaranteeing some money because the injury was from like a year before. Again, I don't know the jargonese of all this, but like by doing it this way, it gives him some more guaranteed money. Again, he's under contract for 2025 and 2026. So maybe this is a way for him to recoup some money, puts the Saints more of in a situation where it's not advantageous for them to take a quarterback. They still have Spencer Rattler on the team. Maybe they still have Jay Kanner. I don't know, but they are picking at 9, and there are a couple quarterbacks they could take. Jackson Dart could be a fit. Shedeur Sanders. Maybe they trade Jalen Miller later. Cam Ward's going to be gone. He's going to the Titans almost certainly number 1. So that's kind of it too. I think the other part of it is like, Derek Carr has an interesting history in the Mountain West, or maybe it was the WAC back in the day at Fresno State with new Saints head coach Kellen Moore, the Boise State legend. Kellen Moore's a little bit older than Derek Carr, and I think they played at one point, and it was the eating of the lunch for the Broncos of whatever the Bulldogs had in their brown sack. So I was kind of wondering, like, where Carr fits into all this. You have to remember, he's a Dennis Allen guy. Dennis Allen was like the guy who drafted him with the then Oakland Raiders back in 2014, second round out of Fresno State. They let him go, and it's a new team in town. Obviously, the financial implications of this requires Carr to be part of this team. You can't really cut him. It's not good. Basically, by doing this injury thing or whatever it is with the guarantee or whatever, he's basically uncuttable at this point. Maybe you can say, like, he's on injured reserve or something, whatever the Browns are doing with Deshaun Watson, for lack of a better word, but a totally different situation, I guess, in terms of ethics. But like, the big thing is, how does this impact the Falcons? Well, first, they're our biggest rival. We hate them. They hate us. And this is the Blogging Day podcast. This basically guarantees that the Saints are going to finish in last place in the NFC South. I think the other 3 teams are competing for a division crown. I think Carolina is going to be a lot better. They got us at the end of last year. We split with them. They seem to have the right head coach there in Dave Canellas. Dan Morgan seems to be a pretty good GM. It's amazing what happens when your owner is not a meddler, and maybe David Tepper's learned that. Tampa Bay is still the team to beat, if you will, in the division, but like, how much longer are they going to be able to hold off Atlanta and Carolina? Everyone's looking at us like, do it. Are you going to do it or not? This is the year where, like, we need to basically try to make the playoffs. It's just like, because I don't want to know what happens if to Raheem Morris or Terry Fontenot if we don't make it. And it's been 8 years since we've been a playoff team. Like, there's too much equity put in this team. There's too many resources. There's too much everything for it not to manifest. The other thing that I think this does is, Kirk Cousins is a potential trade candidate to go over to the Saints. Again, optically, it looks terrible. It's going to blow up in our face if they do that. But by Carr doing this, and if they don't think Spencer Rattler's ready for it, then they're clearly looking for a stopgap, because I think the financial implications of it, maybe they're not ready to take a quarterback at number 9. Maybe that's what they're going to do in 26 when, I don't know, Doug Nussmeier's son, their new OC, Gary Nussmeier, comes out from LSU. You have to remember, the Saints have drafted 1 quarterback in the first round. That was Archie Manning back in 1971. It's been a long time. And, I mean, we still got to play them better. This is the team, like, I would say, like, whenever we get to the schedule, like, that's a win, that's a loss. The Saints are the team I'm going to look at there. I'm like, we have to sweep them. We couldn't do it last year. Didn't do it with the Panthers. Swept the Bucks, and somehow we finished 8-9. The Derek Carr is trying to take a page out of what he's trying to learn vicariously for what happened to Kirk Cousins. Maybe he'll get replaced by Kirk Cousins in some capacity. The big thing I'm trying to say here is Derek Carr is looking out for Derek Carr at this point. I don't think he gives a rat's ass about the Saints anymore. He just wants his money. And I don't know how much longer he's going to play in the league. He got his money. We'll see what happens. And he's gumming it up for them. And I almost feel bad, but I don't like them, so it's kind of funny. But, like, Cousins is a potential candidate to go there. Again, I've said at the top of program or near the top that the Steelers are the team to beat, but the Saints aren't mathematically eliminated from landing him. Maybe this would feed into the notion that Terry Fontenot is a spy. Lord knows that we're that gullible that we would do it, but the Derek Carr thing certainly knocks the Saints down pick. Again, I covered the Raiders for a year prior to being hired full time here. I used to root really hard for Derek Carr. I thought that he had to overcome a lot of nonsense there within the Raiders organization, but he kind of brought some of that with him from Las Vegas to New Orleans upon arrival. The Saints, they've been kicking the can out for so long. They've been robbing Peter to pay Paul, and Peter's not happy about it anymore. They need to hit a reset. They need to rebuild. They've been delaying this forever, particularly in the wake of Drew Brees retiring. This may help them eventually get in that direction. Again, if you're picking up the top 10, you're kind of rebuilding. We weren't. We're 15. We're slightly better than that. We're on the rise. But yeah, I guess to tie a bow on it with the Derek Carr of it all, this basically says like the Saints aren't winning the division. It's like, I think you can go into every division in the NFL. It's like, what's the one team that's not winning the division, and what's the one team that's not finishing in last? I don't know who's not finishing in last in the NFC South. It's probably Tampa. I mean, it could be us. It could be the Panthers. Probably the Saints. But I don't see the Saints winning the division right now. So this is good for us. But it could be bad for us if we trade Cousins there. Lord knows I don't really want that to happen. Yeah, look at that. We talked for about 37 minutes. Had a good time here on a little bit of an abbreviated Wednesday show. Again, did this on Friday last week, less than a week, coming back to you here on the Blog and Dirty podcast. But be sure to watch, like, comment, and subscribe to the Blog and Dirty podcast on YouTube, as it says down here on the ticker. You can follow me, John Buhler, on Twitter or the X at Buhler118. Be sure to read all my stuff at fansided.com. Again, I cover NFL, college football, national scope, and mostly the Atlanta Braves. I do write about other things as well. Be sure to read all of our Atlanta Falcons content on not just Fansided, but Blog and Dirty as well. You can also read it with our regional betting network on ATL Day, my first site there. Coming up on 10 years here. It's kind of crazy. You can follow you can follow us on Twitter at Blog and Dirty FS, fansided.com. No, Blog and Dirty. Yeah. Blog and Dirty FS on YouTube. Yeah. Go there. Picking up a lot of subscribers. I think we're at 281 last time I checked. We're getting closer to 300. I'm really excited. I think there's a chance we may get to 300 in and around the draft. Maybe we get closer to 500 before the start of the season. It'd be amazing. Yeah, I'm just putting this out there. I'm just trying to be a fan, trying to make sense of all the nonsense that is the Atlanta Falcons. It's not easy, but it's kind of fun, or maybe I think it's fun. But I'm gonna keep doing this for a while. Again, the heart of the offseason is kind of where I thrive and I shine as a podcaster, really driving the ditch. Again, once I get past the draft, once we kind of get to the heart of the offseason, I'll bring back on some more of my Minute Media colleagues to talk about, what their teams did. Not everybody at Minute Media is a Falcons fan. There are some, but not all. But we'll talk about the Falcons, talk about this, kind of bringing a fresh perspective here and everything like that. But yeah, I guess I'll just finish with this. Yeah, I'm coming up on 10 years of writing for Fansided in any capacity. I started doing this when I was 25 years old after having a core life crisis. Didn't work out so much doing sales out of UGA. And I just started writing about sports. I started writing about the Atlanta Hawks, and then the Braves were good. And I really enjoyed writing about the Falcons for TL Day back in the day. I obviously started writing more for the .com, the main page. I've had several roles here. I've got hired as evergreen editor. I've covered the Raiders before on Just Blog Baby. Was the first full-time staff writer in Fansided history. The first lead writer in Fansided history. Yeah, I've been doing this for a decade here, and it's been a ride. It hasn't always been pretty. It hasn't always been smooth, but I've been able to build a career here because I wake up every day and I think about sports. I feel like I've got interesting things to say, and the readers agree. Don't always agree with me. I may be a bit of a contrarian ass, but there's place for that for anybody out there. And again, probably to tie a bow on this is imposter syndrome is stupid. There's people out there who are doing something that you could be doing, so might as well be you. And there's plenty of people who are like at the top of their industries who don't have a clue what they're doing. Like Chris Ballard's still a GM of the Indianapolis Colts. Brandon Staley was the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. Christian Hackenberg got drafted in the second round. Mike McCagnon drank coffee while drafting him in the second round. There's plenty of things out there. So you can do anything you want, probably short of being an astronaut, but you keep doing you and I'm going to keep doing me. So yeah, that's how we're kind of feeling here. So yeah, we're going to wrap up the show here in a second here. Again, we'll be doing the show again on Wednesday next week, kind of a draft preview. I'll be on the Stacked in the Box live show for the draft when the Falcons pick. And then I'll be back on, well, I guess I'll be doing a false start with Cody Williams, like a post NFL draft thing after the draft on Thursday next week. Then I'll have a little bit of time off. I'll be doing this show again on Friday, May 2nd. So look for it on April 23rd and then Friday, May 2nd. So that's what we're looking at here. But yeah, talked for 41 minutes, just trying to tie a bow on this. I struggle so much to finish this program, but we're having fun. We're still Falcons fans, and this is the Blogging Dirty Podcast.